Hi everyone. I think we're live. Yes. Okay. So everyone, welcome, and I'm so happy to see that we've got a couple of people here today. So welcome to PRISM's third Kaleidoscopic Topic session of the year. For those of you who don't know, our Kaleidoscopic Topic sessions are our monthly events. They're opportunities for the PRISM community streams to host events that showcase insights from both internal and, in this case, external voices through interviews like this one, panels, workshops, etc. These events are then recorded and then shared within Sumo, on Dojo, and beyond, depending on how our speakers feel. These are educational spaces that everyone is welcome to join and learn from. I'm Alif Trevathan. I suppose most of you will know me already, but just in case, I'm Alif. I'm the Inclusion Belonging Engagement Manager, and I go by she, her pronouns. I'm joined today by the fabulous TaSh Elsie. TaSh is a creator, a gamer, and a communications director. We'll be talking today about allyship and bystanderism in gaming. So TaSh, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit more and about the topic a little bit?
Yes, so I am TaSh. My full name is Tashanique, but the reason why my name is spelled the way it's spelled is because I told my mom in third grade that I didn't like my name. She spelled it T-A apostrophe capital S-H-A-N-I-Q-U-E. And I told her I don't like that my name is a contraction. I think that's unfair. And she said I can change my name, but I have to keep one part. So I kept the capital S as like a tribute to my mom. But
I think it's beautiful. I think it's
thank
beautiful.
you. I do get a few questions about that, but as Olive said, I am a gamer. I am a content creator. I host the podcast Cheat Codes for Women in Games International. I also moderate panels. I'm very passionate about diversity and the inclusivity in the gaming spaces, and I try to be present in a way that allows me to ask questions in spaces to facilitate dialogue because it's my goal to have the stories that we're telling reflect the people that we're telling them to.
Absolutely.
Oh, I should mention, I yes, I am a communications director. I am a former teacher. I was taught for many years. I'm a former stay-at-home mom. I have 3 kids. I have a 16-year-old, a almost 15-year-old, and a
Wow.
10-year-old. And I am a former stand-up comedian. I did stand-up comedy for many years. Yeah.
I knew the first half. I didn't know the second half. That is awesome. Wow. What a varied sort of career. And wow, that's amazing. Thank you
I
so much for sharing.
ironically, I'm an introvert and I'm shy. And so
Really?
but but I do have an understanding that I have a gift for connecting with people.
Mm.
So I try to use that to help make people laugh and help other people be
Wow.
seen.
Well, that was such a beautiful way to wrap up your intro. I really enjoyed that. That was like being taken on a little story. Thank you. Are you happy to introduce us a little bit to the topic today that we'll be talking about?
Yes. So today's topic is about bystanderism versus allyship. And I often talk about allyship because we don't really ask the questions that let us know what this means.
Mm,
But a lot of us are very comfortable being a bystander, but
mm.
we don't realize that in bystanderism, there is a level of harm that's done. And so today we're going to kind of explore what those two topics mean
Yeah,
and kind of talk about some actionable things that we could do to be more of an ally in the spaces that we occupy.
that's perfect. That's perfect. Thank you. Okay. So just to give out a bit of an outline as to what we'll be doing today, I'll be asking the lovely TaSh a couple of questions, and then at the end, for the last kind of 15 to 30 minutes, depending on how many questions we receive, we'll be doing a live Q&A where people can send in their questions. As always, this is being recorded and will be uploaded on Dojo afterwards, just so everyone knows. Okay, let's start with the questions. So first off, I think it's probably a good idea to just give a basic outline, TaSh, to what you think allyship and bystanderism, what they both are, before we begin tackling the big stuff. What would you say that those things are?
So I wrote down some definitions. The Oxford definition defines allyship as active support for the rights of a minority or marginalized group without being a member of it. My personal definition of allyship is privilege and empathy in action.
That's nice. I like that.
The scary thing about saying the word privilege is that people consider privilege a dirty word. And it's not possible to be an ally without acknowledgement of privilege.
Absolutely.
And privilege, yes, it may be true that your life, your background is hard, or there was trauma, or there was pain, and that, yes, that those things are true. But privilege is the understanding of how you are seen in society. And so your privilege is associated with those things. There are certain things that you may have access to based off of your background, your sexual orientation, your gender presentation, even your charisma. There are people that we trust because they are incredibly charismatic, but they're liars, but we trust them because they appear so charismatic. They have the privilege of charisma. So in order to be an ally, it is reaching down from above.
Yes.
It's not pushing from behind. Pushing from behind is sacrifice. So this is not what we're talking about in this space. It's reaching from above. It's understanding I am in this space and there is space for more.
That's a really lovely explanation. I think also kind of touching on what you said about privilege, I think that you're so right in saying people think it's a dirty word. And I think it's an interesting one, because if we talked about it in a clearer, more general way, where we talk about, you're right, exactly, the privilege of being charismatic or of being extroverted. I remember I read a book where it was I can't remember the name. I'll try and pop it in the chat later. But it talked about how the world is kind of set up, obviously, for what we already know, for cis men, for white men, for straight men, for able-bodied men, etc. But also that it's set up for extroverted people, that the way that we conduct our business and interact with each other is really set up for the kind of person that's extroverted and confident and outgoing. And it was just a really interesting way to look at privilege, because I feel people are so afraid to even say the word, and it can mean so much. It's so important to talk about the ones that we're going to be talking, the kind of privileges that we're going to be talking about today, but it goes beyond that as well. Kind of, I think removing the fear from the word would be, I mean, not only useful, but essential to have these kinds of conversations. It's almost impossible. It is, you're absolutely right. You said it yourself. It's impossible to begin to talk about allyship if you can't first acknowledge that privilege exists and that many of us have it and many of us don't. Absolutely. And bystanderism.
Understanding that privilege exists, there has to be an acknowledgement of inherent bias and the bias of certain spaces.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So true. Yeah. And could you talk a little bit about your opinion or your definition of bystanderism? Because I think people might actually, not many people might know what this one means, interestingly.
So bystanderism, we see a lot of people in spaces who are more like, that's not my business. That's not my place. It's their problem if they're not bold enough to exist, or maybe they're not talented enough. And some of it can be quite demeaning and negative, but it really is a decision of inactivity. Bystanderism is placing your comfort over the dignity of someone else.
Absolutely. Yeah. Beautifully put. Yeah. Okay. So we've covered what the topics are. So let's kind of delve into the bigger questions. So first off, what does meaningful and genuinely effective allyship in this particular industry, in the gaming industry, look like to you? And are you able to give a few examples?
When I'll start with a story time.
Please.
So I did not ever say that I was a gamer for a very long time, even though I'm a gamer. And because what I imagined it didn't look like me. Because the people who were the loudest in the room did not look like me. What was created did not favor me. I could make an avatar that with purple skin and that wears what I want, because I'm a person who things don't matter. If I can fight a dragon in this game, why can't I wear what you deem as a male coded outfit? Why are these rules so rigid? So this was something that was hard for me to say I'm a gamer, because I felt like I was not seen in those spaces.
Mm.
So when I went to PAX for the first time, PAX West, I felt really down about
Mm.
myself because I looked around and I did not see myself. I didn't see any 40-year-old Black moms walking around excited to be here. And I wanted to.
Yeah.
And I mean, I did realize eventually, oh, if I don't see that, I can be that. So when just walking around, I went to this booth that was selling different types of dice and beautiful things, and I was talking about how I was so afraid, and I just started playing D&D for the first time, and I was so excited, and one of the ladies behind the counter said, "I'm always looking for someone who looks like me, who is just as excited as you." And she said, "Do you like these?" And it was like $150 pair of dice. And she
Wow.
said, "I want you to have it." And for with no strings attached, because I know how much it means to me to see you. And I boohooed. I was like walking, just crying. Every time I thought about it, I cried, I cried, I cried. But
Oh.
that small moment, that small interaction saying, "I see you and I see me in you,"
Yeah.
that was allyship in action, just in that moment. And that person was already in the space, but isolated in the space.
Mm.
And she told her team what she did, and they were all so encouraging and say reached out to me, and the fact that they rallied behind her was also
Yeah.
allyship in
Yeah.
action.
Yeah. Wow. What a beautiful story. That is so lovely. What a powerful moment that you shared, especially if you were feeling down for that particular reason at that moment. And then this was just placed in your path. That's really, that's really amazing. I'm assuming she was a woman. Was she Black? Was she?
She was Afro-Latina, and she said, "I grew up around all boys, but I always wanted to play D&D, but everybody I played with didn't look like me, so I always felt like I was the only one."
Yeah.
And that's also what I was feeling. For instance,
Yeah.
I always wanted to play Magic the Gathering, but I looked
Yeah.
at who was around the table, and I
Hmm.
like, "Oh, I'm not there."
Yeah. Yeah.
I look
Yeah.
at the cards even, and "Oh, I'm also not
Mhm.
there."
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
so that's not an invitation to attend.
Yes, absolutely. It's so interesting because I remember I was speaking to a white male friend, a cis man, and we were talking about entering into spaces out kind of in the gaming industry and just beyond, entering into a workspace, and how I might walk in and mentally kind of pick out the women in the space and be like, ah,
Mhm.
okay, there are women here. I'm half Pakistani, so if I see someone who is also brown skinned or Desi or South Asian, I'll be like, ah, that's even nicer, and I'll pick out and I'll make a
Right.
mental note. You're evaluating the space as soon as you enter it to make sure it's safe. And this is one of those things that we all know, but he walks into a space and doesn't even it doesn't even enter his
Right.
mind to evaluate if that's a safe space, because it's a given that it's a safe space. And we were talking about it, and he's very kind of aware of his privilege and what have you, but it was a moment that he'd not considered, that in every kind of workspace I enter, or even a work call I enter, you mentally evaluate to make sure that this space
Mhm.
has you in it, or has you in mind, or is making space for a you at this table, and that your voice is going to be listened to. And it was interesting because he'd never considered that his voice would be less important, or that the fact that the people at that table already look like him made it a safe space. He didn't have to think about it. And
Right.
it's just one of those things where, it's privilege in action, right? Where that's a mental load that you're taking on even before you've entered the space. You're already scoping it out to make sure it's safe. And that's another barrier for entry. Before
Right.
you've even taken a step into the door, you're already like on a back foot. So yeah, that was your
That's
experience
very
there.
true.
Yeah.
People sometimes they blanch at the thought when we mention, is this space safe or is this safe for me? Because they assume that we're talking about physical violence, and
Yes.
but we're talking about a different type of violence, which
Absolutely.
is also damaging to feel that you are isolated and not included in a space that should be an inclusive space. It's
Mm.
storytelling.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So simply put, it's storytelling. And I think it's really important to say that it is violence, because we talk about it, right? We talk about safe spaces, just you said, and people assume that we mean a physical violence or even kind of some kind of verbal violence. We don't mean either of those things, but we are still talking about something that is a violence because it is still damaging and harmful. It has violent consequences. It is a violence. And I've had conversations like this before, and people are really tentative and hesitant to use the word violence because they think I'm being dramatic or over the top. It's not dramatic or over the top at all. If you enter that space and leave that space thinking, oh, I can never go back there, violence has
Right.
been done to you then, So I just wanted to pick out that it's so important to name it for what it is. And then
Definitely.
the mental, kind of even like spiritual and to some degree physical toll that can take on you is a violence. So yeah, just another reason why we should have safe spaces. Find me every talk I ever give, I always mention at some point the importance of safe spaces always comes up because it's just never-endingly relevant. Thank you for that really wonderful example. That was really touching as well. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the opposing relationship between allyship and bystanderism?
So there are things that we already know to be true. Gina Davis Institute on, I think, Gender Studies and Media did a comprehensive study and and listed all the statistics of things we know. So in 2017, they said the top 100 selling games, 22% were female characters, 20% were people of color. Male characters had twice as much dialogue as female characters. 1% of characters were disabled, and 3% were identified as LGBTQIA. We know those things to be true. To know those things are true
Mm,
and proceed as if that's someone else's problem
yeah,
is bystanderism.
so true. Yeah, yeah.
There's a quote from there's an author called Cole Arthur Riley, and she says, "It's not your responsibility to alleviate anyone's guilt. As Audre Lorde said, guilt is the beginning of knowledge. Do not spare them the mirror." And I think that uncomfortable
Yes.
feeling, because remember in the beginning I said placing comfort over someone's
Mm,
dignity, that discomfort is a form of guilt
yeah,
where, because there is an inaction, because there is not an internal view of what's happening. And it doesn't mean that you have to get it right. You just have to be open to ask questions. And I think bystanders don't ever feel like they're going to ask the questions. They don't want to, because number one, they don't want the answer.
yeah,
And,
yeah,
and number two, they don't want the discomfort of assuming they're the only one who needs to know.
yeah, yeah. And also the kind of consequence of there being a responsibility that follows. They don't
Right.
want. They don't want to hear that bit.
Right.
They don't
Because
want to
when
hear
you
that
know
bit.
better, then you have to do better.
Yeah,
At some point you do. And I think that we shouldn't let the thought that we don't know what to do next uh, stop us from acting, because okay, I'm trying to frame this properly.
mm, mm,
It should not stop you from acting, because empathetic curiosity is enough to be able to ask questions from a place of kindness
yeah,
is enough to help.
yeah, yeah. I think it is. It is that the first kind of beginnings of guilt can take you two different ways, can't they? They can take you down a path of thinking, okay, I need to do something about this. I feel in my body as a human being that something is not right, and I feel guilty, and let me act on this guilt. Or you can go down the other way, which is I feel guilt and I don't want to feel guilt and I don't want to know anything about it, and I don't have to know anything about it because it doesn't touch me. So I can get up tomorrow and keep going and it will be fine because I'm not going to be personally affected by whatever's going on over there.
Right.
And it's taking that, it's hard. And this is the thing, I think a lot of the often people are surprised by how hard it is. I've had a couple of like unconscious bias trainings before I joined Sumo that were so neutral in their approach to talking about biases, and they were so afraid of talking about the harm that biases can take. And it was, you know, interesting, even the name unconscious bias, instead of calling it something with a little bit more teeth, something like being like anti-racism, or, you know, directly calling it what it is, avoiding using the isms and the bigotries and talking about the consequences of the isms and the bigotries, because there's so much fear of making people feel uncomfortable. And we're at a full stop. No, there's nowhere to go if you're not willing to feel uncomfortable. There's just, you kind of have to sit in that discomfort for a bit. And if you need to vent about that discomfort, if you need to manage those emotions, you should. Then it's about figuring out where to manage those emotions, right? Don't talk to your like friend or family member who is of a marginalized identity and you're like, oh, it's so difficult for me. Manage those feelings. Absolutely, you have every right to do so, but manage where you're putting the feelings and how you're managing them. You know, it's so important. But you do have to feel uncomfortable. You do have to feel uncomfortable, and you do have to be called out. It does need to be identified. And I think especially in kind of corporate workspaces, there's so much fear around being controversial, even if it isn't controversial. It's simply the state of things. But we're so afraid to talk about things and give them some teeth and give them the reality that they have. And it prevents conversation. It prevents open, genuine conversation, and it doesn't make safe spaces safe. It doesn't make them safe at all. If you can't say this thing happened to me and it was awful for these reasons without making people uncomfortable, which then prevents conversation, you can't move anywhere.
Right. And it is a level of violence when we are requiring the marginalized person to be brave in that space.
Yes.
To be so brave to exist because you don't want to be uncomfortable. So you're relying on their to quiz them, because I've had people come, okay, can I pick your brain about DEI? I was like, oh, wait a minute. That's not what I'm here for at the moment. Why would you assume that? Why is that burden on me?
Mm-hmm.
But the burden is on me more times than it should be. And I think it's so unfair to require me to be brave to exist in my own fullness.
Yeah.
That's unfair.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there are so many opportunities for allies to step in at moments like that. There's just so many opportunities at any point for people to step in and say, hey, let me remove this burden and let me take it on, because I think I can do this without it causing me emotional damage. I won't take it won't take off damage, but you know, I'm not going to take damage from this, but you might, so let me take it on. But there is that fear that prevents us. It's such a damaging kind of it prevents conversation. Without conversation and openness, there's no moving forward.
Right. And this is where understanding of privilege comes in, because if you truly understood your privilege, you would understand that even though you may be uncomfortable for a moment, you still have the privilege to recover in a way that the marginalized person will not.
Yeah. I think it's also understanding that, isn't it? It's understanding that when people come to you, when people from marginalized identities come to you and tell you this is hurting me, believe them. You may never have experienced that pain, but they're telling you this hurts. This is harming me. Listen to me. Believe them. And I think often in certain spaces people don't, because they can't imagine. Of course you can't imagine. Of course you
right?
can't imagine. You're very lucky to not be able to imagine it. Good for you. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, so many blocks, I think, that we're still having to overcome. Which kind of leads really well to the next question, which is, are we happy with how we've talked about the relationship between allyship and
Yes.
bystanderism? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So moving on a little bit then, to kind of what we've begun to touch on now is, we often talk about what allyship should look like, but realistically, what do we think it looks like now, and how far do we feel we have to go?
It is it is a tricky thing, because as a Black woman, when I see a character that is coded as Black in a game, it is a lot of times it's not a person who is physically presenting as Black, but it's some other type of character, and they're almost like a linguistic minstrel.
Right.
It's a show of a culture rather than just being. But so I see that, I see, and I'm happy to say, okay, so we have someone that's close, we have a voice actor that's working, we have the beginnings of it, but we don't have enough people in the room for those who are in control to say, well, why does this character have to be like this? Or can this character be like this? Is this character's race, is this character's background, is their gender important to this part? No, we need the people who are willing to ask those questions, but because it's an Ouroboros, because it's a snake eating its own tail, which, I mean, I understand Ouroboros is it could mean many things. It could mean the cycle of creation. It could be life, but it's also ingesting what you produce. So we are creating what we see. And if we're not creating the opportunities to see more, then we're not creating the opportunities to be more. And that's where it's so tricky for me, because as a Black woman, everything I do is Black. Just by the very nature of who I am, it doesn't have to be something that's profoundly cultural. It's just my existence is a Black existence.
Yeah. Yes.
So why do we not give the grace to characters to do the same? Why are these rules so rigid? We are starting to take baby steps towards understanding that this whole thing is made up.
Yeah.
But we are still imposing these imaginary sets of rules.
Right.
While we're creating things out of imagination, which is wild to me.
Yeah. It says so much about how our imagination is being curtailed by the way we function. In kind of the scenario that you're describing now, where you've got a bunch of developers and writers and designers designing a Black character that, as you said, has a kind of feeling of it being a minstrel, of them being a minstrel. How would you say that an ally could change that or disrupt that process? In what way could an ally come in and say, well, what would they say? How could that be done, do you think?
Number one, by asking questions. I don't think enough people are asking why. Why are we doing this? Why is this because if most people are really focused on the bottom line, we need to get this out.
Yes.
But the choices that we are making matter. So why is this like this?
Yeah.
Why does this? There are so many voice actors who are very versatile, who happen to be Black, who are or any other background, but yet you're choosing to utilize them in this space, in this time. Why?
Yeah.
And just the question of why, from a place of kindness, shifts the energy in the space to where there's a thought associated, because now this is kind of automatic, I think, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's so just the taking the putting on the brakes for a second to ask why shifts the energy enough to start to shift the room, to start to shift the choices. And it's not, I feel like being the one to ask why, that's not too much to ask.
I don't think it is.
It really is the bare minimum.
Have you ever seen that happen? Have you seen an ally disrupt a space in that way?
I haven't. I hope for it. I've disrupted many spaces, standing up, shaking,
Yeah.
trying to temper my emotion to have hopefully a meaningful impact on what I'm saying. And I feel so hurt
Mm.
every time I sit back down, knowing that the people who came up to me afterwards, that was so brave what you said. You did it. I feel so hurt that they sat there and watched me.
Right. Yeah. And that has happened multiple times.
Hmm.
And have the what you said in those moments, what were those things taken on by that team or by that?
Yes. Hmm. They were taken on, and a lot of times it did shift the energy in the space, and just to get people to just take a hard stop to maybe that this path that we're on is not the best thing at the moment. But the
Mm,
damage that was done to
yes.
me was
Yes.
bigger than that change. I feel.
Yes. So it's not worth it
Right.
for you is the thing, but it would be so worth it for an ally to stand up and back you
Right.
up, to rally behind you in that moment. And there are so
Right.
many missed opportunities where they fail to do that, where we have failed to do that so many times. It's interesting because these opportunities, to everyone who's listening and afterwards when we have this recording up, these opportunities will continue to come. There are always going to be scenarios where there may well be someone in the room who is of a marginalized identity who is thinking, I am the only person that's going to stand up, and actually I can't bear it because it's too much and I shouldn't have to. There are so many opportunities where allies could do something and make such an impact, not only to whatever the game ends up being, which is fantastic because it could have a much wider impact, but to that one person sat in that room thinking, oh my God, what a relief. I didn't have
Right.
to do this.
Or even to
Yeah.
be public in your support of that person who stood up,
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
rather than making it an aside,
Yeah,
because
afterwards.
that feels more damaging. That you privately approached me to say how much you supported me, but publicly you were silent. And even if you had nothing to say, you were dumbfounded in that moment, but you felt a feeling of support. I support that. I'm
Yes.
100% behind what she said.
Yes.
Is enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And can make all the difference. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. As I say, these scenarios, these opportunities are going to continue to come up. And it doesn't, for those of you who are listening and who are in a position where you could be an ally to whatever identity, it does take a degree of bravery, right, to voice your support. But just envision how much more bravery it takes for the person who is of a marginalized identity sat in that room. It not only does it take more bravery, but afterwards it incurs a level of damage that you will not have to take on,
Right.
as an ally. So just, yeah, it may be a bit scary, but it's so much scarier for that other person. It's compassion in its most simple form. If you boil it right down, it is just being compassionate. And I don't think that's too much to ask either. I don't think a basic level of compassion is too much to ask.
Or else nothing changes, and then we're complicit in the ongoing harm.
Yes.
And that's it, and it's really no other either or of it. Your comfort is you being complicit in harm.
Yes.
And that scares me. I don't understand why it doesn't scare other people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think for many people, it's just an unwillingness to confront it, even beginning to confront it, because they can't deal with the guilt, which is something
Right.
that we all have to just deal with. And you'll have support in dealing with it, but you know, you need to start. That needs to start. How
I
have you?
I
I'm sorry.
I have so the for those of you who are listening who may have an issue with violence or harm, this is a trigger warning for the moment.
Thank you.
And so when I was 4, my father was unarmed and shot to death by police officers around the corner from my house. And not only is that part of my very beginnings of life, it created ongoing harm because the officers who were responsible for his death were still on duty and protect and served my community with the
Protect and
knowledge that
served.
so I grew up with an inherent
Mm,
feeling that I am not safe, I'm not seen, and I'm not okay. And I told that detail about me many times, and the thing that hurts me the most about that is that it took me telling that detail about myself for people to have an understanding that those things exist. That for people to have an understanding that there is a bias, there is damage,
mm,
there is and I feel like we know so much. So much has been documented. If you're on
yes.
social media, we see videos, we see things that where
Yes.
we don't have to rely on someone else's account on those
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
But yet people haven't would not decide to make a different choice until I expose that trauma that I experienced. And that's a larger scale, but on the smaller scale, we're asking people to do that over and over and over again in spaces in order for us to care.
Mm,
And that really seems unfair. It shouldn't take
absolutely.
that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, as you mentioned, talking large scale, but it has an impact. It's just as relevant, you know, but on a small scale, say in our industry or just in the workplace, it is bonkers. It's horrendous that that is something that you should even need to begin to contemplate before entering your place of work, which
Right,
should be a guaranteed safe space. I mean, there should not need to be, and I think everyone would agree with this, but it's only then tackling what it actually looks like that that people struggle with. But I think if you were to say to any old person, I should not have to be reliving my trauma daily at work, they would
right,
agree. It's really that, you know, it really is that. You should not have to relive or expose your wounds to people in order for them to humanize or listen to you. And you're
right,
absolutely right. We have so much documented evidence. It's every day. It's everywhere. It's horrendous, but we've got it. There's really no excuse to have to put someone in a kind of position where they're coming into work thinking, how might I be traumatized today?
right,
That is
right.
just
And for me to enter the workplace, whenever there's a very public police shooting of an
yeah,
unarmed person,
yeah,
I'm not always in the best mental space.
yeah,
And being not in the best mental space, being a female, being a Black woman,
yeah.
I'm not met with empathy.
Mm,
There is a bias
yeah.
against emotions that don't look a certain way.
Yes, yeah, and stereotypes as well.
Hmm.
Stereotypes around what that looks like and what it means. Yeah, yeah. Have you felt that in this industry as well? A lack of empathy?
Not so much. I
Okay.
am I feel like I was very uh, timid in the
Mm,
beginning. Um, but then very quickly I had a very large platform to talk to people who were also marginalized and isolated within the gaming community, but people who are wildly successful at the same time.
mm, mm,
So very quickly I had to take a big step into that space and realize that by amplifying their isolate, or their feelings of isolation, or their thoughts about the industry, that we are taking steps towards making change, and that's why I keep going.
Absolutely. So you felt a difference in this industry than you have in others.
Yes. Yes.
Do you have any idea why that might be?
Um, I think I want to say it's the industry, but I actually think it's the people who I get to be around,
Hmm.
because I'm seeking out the people who are the change makers, who are
Mm.
different
Mm.
and brave in their difference,
Yeah.
even though it's scary. And they will admit that it's scary, and and it's not easy. But that's who I've been seeking out, because those people are out there. And I think that's the hard part, because conversely, you have other people who aren't not paying attention to the fact that people are already out there being change makers. We're not connecting with those people. We're not talking to them. We're not
Mm. Mm.
paying them for their time even.
Yes.
So
Yes.
many
Yeah.
so many people are just yes, you want to have a conversation. Yes, you want to chit chat over lunch. Pay them for their this is
Yes.
years of expertise. This is years
Yeah.
of trauma. This is experience. Let's
Yes.
compensate them for that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's years of lived experience. I mean, absolutely. And those change makers that you're referring to, the people that you surround yourself with, are any of them allies?
Yes. Yes. Just by being brave enough to say hard stop on this.
Yeah.
Or there's a few people who even left the larger machine to go try to make their own things, because they
Amazing.
felt like there was no other way for them
Yeah.
to make something that told a different story.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So they had to leave and start their own. Yeah.
Yes.
I wonder how often that happens. I imagine it happens
It
often.
happens a lot. Yes.
Have you
It
seen
does
it
happen
happen
a lot.
yourself various times, many times?
Yes. And usually to success. I mean, I understand people are
Mhm.
having they're not probably not all sharing their struggles. but
That's true. Yeah.
but I have seen it happen a lot. And I mean, that's how Women in Games International came
Yeah.
about. Just someone saying, especially after Gamergate, to
Yeah.
say this is toxic,
Yeah.
and the reason not the reason why, but we're fostering
Yes.
this space because we are not creating opportunities for people to see other things.
Mm.
So it's almost like a confirmation bias. So people feel so emboldened
Yes.
in their violence against people, and that's irresponsible. And I think that's why
Absolutely.
so many nonprofits kind of popped up in that space
Yes.
immediately, in that immediate aftermath, to say, okay, let's take a hard stop, let's reevaluate, let's have different conversations, let's do different things.
Yeah. Let's start looking in the mirror. What are we doing
Mhm.
that could have facilitated what happened?
Right. And happened again.
Yeah. 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 And to some degree might be happening now. Yeah. Absolutely. We've got a long way to go, I think,
Yes.
is what we can say to answer that question. We've got a long way to go. Do you feel hopeful? Please feel free
I
to say
do.
no if you don't. Okay,
I
that's
I
good.
really I really do feel hopeful, and I think the hope is why I'm so passionate about the things I
Mm,
talk about.
yeah.
I'm always I'm always reading and looking for who's the change maker in this space, who has the heart for change, who has a vision for something different. And
Mm,
I try to connect to those people, and I think once if I've lost hope, I wouldn't.
yeah.
I keep going.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. How long have you been in this industry, if you don't mind my asking?
It's been just over 3 years.
And have you seen a change in those three? And it's not. I suppose it's not a hugely long time, but have you seen
Right.
a change in those 3 years?
Yes and no.
Mm, mm,
I
yeah.
know that there was a massive round of layoffs, and a lot of
Yes.
the programs that were most affected were the newest created, and the newest created programs were the diversity based,
Yes.
inclusion based programs. So yes and no.
Yeah. Yeah. We take one step forward and two steps back, it seems.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So to answer how far do we have to go? We have a while to go. We have a
We
little while.
do.
We have
We have
ways
a
to
little
go.
while.
We have a little while.
We are on our way though. We're on our way.
That is what I try and try and focus on each day when I wake up is we have a long way to go, but at least we've got a foot on the path. You know, we're on the road. We're on the
Right.
road.
Have you
Me.
seen, there's a meme that says, you mean I have to go to the gym every day just to have a body that's mid like this? So it's like it's kind of like, yes, we have to keep going every day, even when it's
Yes.
mid. Even
Yeah, it's mid. Absolutely. Me and my boss, my manager, Leon Killen, he's the head of inclusion and belonging here at Sumo. And his constant refrain, just generally about the world, is always we're on a journey. And that's what we say to each other nearly every day. And I imagine that he's either watching now or will be watching later, and we'll find that very funny. But yes, we are on a journey. I think that's kind of the way you kind of have to look at it is, yes, we have a long way to go, but
right.
we're walking in the right direction.
We are. And the thing is, this is not an overnight fix. This is years, this is hundreds and hundreds of years in the making.
Yes.
This is built on a bias.
Yes.
This is built on this. So naturally it will not be fixed overnight.
Yeah. So true. And those fixes, there are many of them, and they all look different. And I think, you know, touching on like being an ally, it's also empowering these people to understand how much of a difference they can make by, as we said, disrupting those spaces, or, you know, standing up, or being brave, or being supportive, or whatever it may be. It's also facilitating their understanding that this could have a huge impact.
Right.
Yeah. There is scope for change. Yeah.
If I'm on a train and someone is sitting down and they have 3 kids and they're trying to wrangle and they need to get up on the next stop, they need to press the button, and we're coming close to the stop, and they can't press the button because they are trying to get the least I can do is stand up and press the button.
Yeah.
To stop the train. That's it. So I think the beginning of all of this is just stopping the train.
Yes. Yeah. It's exactly what you said, isn't it? Disrupt the space. Let's full stop. Let's reevaluate.
Right.
Let's take a minute. Let's take a pause.
Take a moment.
It's okay. You know, it's not the end of the world if we need to pause and reevaluate. It's okay.
Right. Or you can let her miss her stop and just go, uh-oh.
You know, but you could, but why?
Why?
Exactly. Yeah. Why? When so little effort could have so much impact, I think is what we're trying to say, right? So little effort on the behalf of allies could have such a huge impact. And it is also that helping them understand how much of an impact they will have had on that woman and her 3 children. She might have missed a stop and then missed dropping the kids off, and that could have ruined a whole day and ruined a whole week. And if you pressed that button,
maybe she had a job interview and she was going to get it, but now she missed it. You made her miss her stop.
She had a hospital appointment. You don't know, right? There is this one small action that any ally could make in whatever way could have rippling effects that ultimately, as we were talking about before, are not damaging to the ally in the way that they would be to the marginalized person. So what ultimately it's a question of like, come on, what do you have to lose?
Right. Press the button, stop the train. That's all you gotta do.
Yeah, that's all you gotta do. Just press the button. Okay. Next question. This is our final question because I realize we only have 10 minutes left. This is a kind of heavier question, and we've touched on it a little bit already, but what kind of toll do you feel the effects of bystanderism and a lack of allyship has on marginalized communities in this industry, and where might we see those effects reflected in the games we play and make?
we definitely see them in the community. We think about the people who are the most vocal about the games that they play. It's not necessarily the nicest people. For instance, I love playing video games with my son, and
Mm,
when we join something and we're all talking, like if we're playing some sort of like co-op game or
mm,
a first person shooter type thing,
mm.
I can't talk in there if we're playing with other people because it doesn't matter if they're on my team. If they're strangers, I am immediately a target. I'm not. It's just by my existence, just by me coming. So I won't talk. I have to kind of pretend like I'm someone else because I'm not welcome in that space. And
Mm,
all I want to do is spend time with my son.
yeah,
So for me, I'm not coming to disrupt your space. I'm not coming to do something to you. I'm just trying to spend time with my son. But I'm subject to violence in a way that it's not necessary for this space. And it's unreasonable.
yes,
And we know this not just from my own experience, but we have documented incidences of other people dealing with hate and violence from these gaming
yes,
communities,
yeah,
but there is no change from the
mm,
higher ups that to either change who they're putting in the games
yeah,
or even moderate how the games are run.
yeah.
And I think that's bystanderism. Bystanderism is keeping a mother from bonding with her son because you don't want to make other people uncomfortable. You want them to be able to, they can say whatever, but they're hurting people.
They're hurting people.
Yes.
And for spaces like that, it would just take some moderation. It just takes people being those spaces being moderated and being made safe. Is that
Right.
so much to ask? If
But
the
when you see those games, that those are usually the ones where the characters are predominantly male,
yeah,
the the people in the room are predominantly male.
yeah,
So there is it's not a friendly space to a black mom.
yeah, yeah,
It's not created as such because it wasn't considered.
yeah, absolutely. And the empty space there is deafening. You feel it as soon as you
Right.
enter it. This was not made with me in mind.
Right. It was
This was not
not
made
made
with
with
me
me
in
in
mind.
mind.
No.
And that's it's not cool.
No, yeah.
My son, he's very excited when he finds a game where the characters break the rules to where because I said, why is your character why is it she? Are you doing anything? He said, well, her armor's better. And it's just that simple for for people, right?
Yes, 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 of course. It should be that simple.
It should be that simple,
It really should be. Oh, the armor's better, man. I want to
right?
win.
The armor's better.
Yeah,
It should
absolutely.
and I thought, well, that makes perfect sense to me.
Yes, it does. It absolutely does. It absolutely does.
But
Yeah.
I think that people don't necessarily understand that the world we live in it could be very isolating, especially for neurodivergent people of color. There's already an
Mm.
othering
Yeah.
in being in a
Yeah.
marginalized community, and there's an othering by being neurodivergent. So a lot of
Yeah.
times, the only time they have to connect with other people or to even see themselves represented is through gaming and
Mhm.
through these online communities.
Yeah.
So can their avatar reflect them? And that's what gets you back to the empathetic why. Why doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And can they be safe to be them?
Can they be
That
safe?
avatar to look like them in that space.
Right.
Is it
Can they be
safe?
safe? Can they be seen?
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I suppose then the tolls that bystanderism and a lack of allyship has on our communities is not feeling seen.
Right.
Apart from what we've talked
And
about
not feeling
already, which
safe.
is violence. Yeah, yeah. And those, the not feeling seen thing, the feeling invisible or unimportant has such a mental wear and tear that I
Right.
can't imagine. I don't know. I don't know because I don't know about these things, but I can't imagine that it doesn't have some kind of ultimately some kind of physiological effect as well, where after you know not feeling visible, especially in those things that you love. If your son loves gaming, you know, it's such a right to feel so seen and so it's celebrated the same way everyone else does. Everyone else is when they enter those spaces. You know, not having to think about his safety or his mum's safety when she comes to play with him. You know, it's the most simple thing in
Right.
the world.
And the thing that broke my heart was that he was apologizing. He was
Oh,
afterwards. He's like, "I'm so sorry. I'm so," and I'm telling him, "It's not. This is not your fault. This is so much bigger than you
yeah,
wanting to play with me. And this is not your fault
yeah,
because it got really bad, and
really,
it was scary to the point where I said, I don't know if I want you to play this game in this
yeah,
capacity." And
yeah,
it broke my heart.
yeah, yeah. Of course, that's so upsetting. That's so upsetting. I'm so sorry. I'm so
Thank
sorry.
you.
That sucks. That sucks
Yeah.
for him and for you, for both of you. That sucks. Um, okay. Gonna wrap up what we're talking about on a bit of a sad note, but I think it's important that we're being honest and realistic about the state of things. You know, we're as we said, we're on the path, but we're not in a good spot yet. We're
Right.
not in a good spot yet, and that's important to acknowledge. It's important to acknowledge, and this is a real life impact. You know, the real life impact is that you as a mum can't sit down and play a game with your son. Like what? But
All I
that's a
want.
real
Right.
impact. So it's so important to acknowledge that this is what it looks like in real life for a real person, just as everyone else's, but you know, to see it, to hear it. I think it's what we said though, isn't it? That you shouldn't have to reveal these things in order to be humanized and heard and listened to when there's already so much evidence around. But yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, Tash. Well, we're gonna see if we get any questions in, but first I just want to thank you so much for your candidness and your transparency and kind of being so open with me, with us. I genuinely really appreciate it. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I
Thank you
really
so much
enjoyed
for
everything you
having
had
me.
to say. No, of
Thank
course.
you.
And I hope we have you again. Hint, hint, wink, wink. um, so we've got a question in. Fab. Okay, so this question comes from an anonymous question person. How do you, Tash, engage fellow allies to be part of conversations about race and support initiatives aimed at people of colour?
This is kind of a tricky question.
Mm,
There is This is kind of like a human to human, person to person thing. So engaging fellow allies, usually I find myself kind of isolated without the aid of allies in a lot of
yeah,
spaces.
yeah.
And but when I talk about things to support initiatives and aimed at people of color, I get really passionate about that because there is a bias that and a grace that we don't give to people of color.
Mm,
And I think that the initiatives aimed at kind of opening the eyes of the company or opening the eyes of those
mm,
around you
yeah.
are really beneficial because it helps us qualify talent differently.
Yes.
We
Wow.
we get very used to looking at talent or ability in a certain way, and what about when it looks like something else? And there's a lot of internal bias that kind of keeps us from recognizing it as such. So I think the programs kind of allow us to view it in a practical way.
Mm, yeah.
Because we think
Mm.
about opportunities. Like for instance, I have a friend group where everyone grew up playing an instrument. They play
Mm.
several instruments, and so that's one community I'm part of. And there's another community where like we all just kind of sing.
Oh.
And I feel but we don't sing together, but I feel bad because I
Mm,
always wish I could play an instrument, but I realized, oh, they had the ability to have
mm,
lessons. They had the ability to get instruments, they had so much that allowed them the ability to play those instruments, to learn those different things that I didn't have. And the only instrument I had was free, and it was my voice. So does that mean that we're not musicians? So, because you could look at them and say, well, that's a musician. He plays the piano. But you wouldn't look at me who sings and say, well, she's a musician. So we have to change how we qualify talent.
Yeah.
And that's usually done through these support initiatives.
Yeah. Yeah. How we measure what talent looks like, where it's at, what we should expect from it. Absolutely. And just to touch on what the question is saying, how have you found it easy to engage people when you've been in gaming spaces and companies and such? Have you found it easy to begin conversations about having initiatives or supporting initiatives? Have you found allies when trying to push initiatives or programs like this?
I've found it easy to engage, to have conversations, but I have yet to see the conversations evolve into the action.
Right. Okay.
But I do have the understanding that that the conversations are seeds that may not. I mean, how long does it take a pineapple to grow? So I do have the understanding that there are seeds, and I've just been around for 3 years, so this may not be a 3-year turnaround.
A 3-year pineapple.
Right. But it's a seed planted.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think just being willing to have the conversation, to engage a fellow ally just by asking why, from a point of empathy, because we're always going to go back to empathy.
Yes. Yeah. I say that all the time. I'm always, empathy and compassion. Absolutely. It is positive to hear, at least, that you've not found it difficult to begin those kinds of conversations with allies, or I suppose not. I suppose if they're interested in having those kinds of conversations, they are, to some degree, they are an ally. So it's good to hear that you've not had much pushback when bringing up or talking about, even if you're not the one bringing it up, which is, even better.
And I haven't had much stress in that space. It's been receptive conversations. It hasn't been it hasn't been battles.
Right. Okay. So it's not been antagonistic. Wow. Okay. We've got another question from Adele. Okay, I will read it out to you. Thank you so much for this talk. It's been so powerful and inspirational. The discussion around privilege really resonated with me at the beginning. It took the BLM movement for me to really recognize and realize my privilege. And there definitely were those feelings of shame at just how ignorant I've been. But now so grateful to have the exposure to those feelings. Do you have any resources you'd recommend that you found really insightful around allyship or reducing bias? Even some of your favorite resources from Women in Games International would be great.
One resource that I talk about often, as I develop a friendship with someone. His name is Mike Knox, and he has a company called the Mattering Lab, and he does like leadership training, and his whole mission is you cannot be an effective leader if you're doing it in a way where you are damaging other people.
Oh, have we frozen? I think TaSh might have frozen.
I think that's a really great place. And also Women in Games International has programs where we do mentorship programs and different panels where everyone is open to talk about these things. And we have different topics every month. I think the next mentorship cycle starts in October, I want to say.
Okay. Fab. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll pull together what TaSh has shared and make sure that when it gets uploaded that I make reference to those bits. If maybe you could send me some links after we've finished, TaSh, that would be great. Thank you so much. Okay, next question. Do you have an example of a game or a game company that does allyship well when it comes to race and different ethnicities?
I think Rainbow Unicorn. It's an indie game company, and I think they do because it's when it's done well, it seems effortless. It doesn't seem like there is a mission, but when you look at it, you see that there is, And I think they do it really well with understanding that not everything looks the same and not everything has to
Mm,
look the same, but
mm,
everyone can bring something to the table.
mm.
And I got to meet and talk to a bunch of people, and I think they're really the best example of that.
Do you have any examples you might be able to give? No stress if that's off the top of your head, if
No,
that's too much
no,
of a request.
that's not, no,
Um,
I don't.
that's fine. That's absolutely fine. No problem. That's no problem at all. No, I was trying to think myself if I have any examples, and I think I would have said the same thing, but I also can't think of any specific
Right, not off the top of
instances.
my head.
No, that's absolutely fine. Okay, we don't seem to have any more questions yet, but we'll give it until 10. Oh, yeah, no, nothing yet. We'll give it until 10 past-ish. And then if we have no more further questions, we'll wrap things up. But TaSh's contact info and everything is obviously already available. So if people want us to do another session with TaSh, then I would certainly love to do that. And I'm sure there will be a request for it, because this has been really wonderful. Even for me, TaSh, it's been fantastic to talk to you. I really can't thank you enough. It's been really
Thank you.
just a really lovely way to kind of, well, for me, I'm kind of wrapping up towards the end of the day, whereas you've just started.
I just started. Yeah.
Just started, before we hopped on live. TaSh told us it was, what was it, 7:30 in the
It was
morning in California?
yeah. Yeah. Now it's 9, so we're good.
Oh gosh, still,
I just want to take a moment to encourage everyone, because
yes.
guilt is not necessarily a bad thing. If we look at guilt as the beginning of knowledge, or a quest or a thirst for knowledge, then it's not it doesn't go to the void. It's so helpful, and we have so much research. So yes, I feel guilty. Where do I start? We have people
Mm,
who are doing the hard work. I think I
yeah,
mentioned the Gina Davis Institute of Gender
you
Bias
did,
in Media.
yes.
So there's another organization called Able Gamers, where if you have any questions about diversity and inclusion as it affects gamers with disabilities, that's a great place to start, because everyone deserves the right to play. And not only are they taking the action, but they have the research that supports
Mm,
their mission. So we have so many places. So don't let the guilt be the end, the hard stop for you. Let the guilt be the starting place for your quest for knowledge.
absolutely. Guilt can be so useful. It can be so useful. I think, it's the beginning of potential.
Right.
It's where you can start movement. I think is, at least my experience with it has been that way. That it was guilt, and I was like, okay, this is horrible, and I hate feeling this way, but well, I'm gonna have to do something about it. And then so much opened up as a result of that, you know. Um, we've just got a lovely comment from Danny, who is always ever so sweet. Thank you so much for the session. It was wonderful to have you here and hear you talk about your experience, and we hope to have you back soon,
Thank
which
you so much.
I suspected would happen. Yeah, I'm really hopeful that we can get TaSh on again, everyone.
I
So
will love that.
yay, I'm glad. Okay. It looks like we don't have any more questions. Again, if people want more from TaSh, then all you need to do is let me know, and I can reach out and we can sort something out. But I will pull together the resources that you've mentioned. I'll comb through the recording afterwards and make sure that I've got everything sorted so that I can share that with everyone. So is there anything else that you would like to say, TaSh, before we kind of think about wrapping things up?
Um, no, take a listen to the podcast. It's called Cheat Codes. It's based
Cheat
off of
codes.
the I Cheat Codes, because I like the Konami code, because every if you think about it, we're going through all these levels, and if you're a game developer, you shouldn't have
Mm,
to beat every level to find out where the bugs are.
so
So
true.
so I like to give cheat codes for different things about leadership in the gaming industry, about internal bias, about bias in the code of AI. So I talk about so many different topics. I even talk about my own personal struggles. And I think it's a great resource. I try to provide resources at the end of every episode. So listen to it if you can. It's on
Yes,
Spotify. It's called Cheat Codes. And
absolutely.
connect with me on LinkedIn. I love to reach out to people.
Yes, plug yourself. Yes, we love to hear about it. I always put that at the end of our little questions. I'm like, plug yourself, tell us about your work. We want to hear about it. So that's fantastic. Cheat Codes podcast, everyone. But as I say, I'll make sure that I pull together those resources and we've got links to everything so everyone can find TaSh online and connect and listen to her work. Again, thank you so much to everyone who's joined us today. Thank you so much for everyone who's asked us these wonderful questions. And finally, thank you, TaSh, so much.
Thank you. You were amazing moderator. I appreciate the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, Dan, whenever you're ready, we will hop off live. Thanks, everyone. Bye.